Dear listeners, as we gather for this episode of Hikes and Mics, our hearts are heavy with the recent events unfolding in Southern California. The devastating wildfires have ravaged beloved landscapes, destroyed homes, and most tragically claimed lives. To all those affected, the families mourning loved ones, individuals who lost their homes, and communities facing the aftermath, we extend our deepest sympathies and unwavering support. The magnitude of this disaster is profound. In these trying times, it's essential to come together as a community. Many of you have reached out asking how you can assist those impacted. Please check out the episode show notes to learn more about how you can help out the individuals and communities impacted by these fires. To those on the front lines, the brave firefighters, first responders, and volunteers, your courage and dedication do not go unnoticed. Your tireless efforts to protect our communities and natural spaces are deeply appreciated. In the face of such adversity, it's natural to feel overwhelmed. Remember, it's okay to seek support, lean on one another, and take time to heal. Our trails and mountains have always been symbols of resilience and strength. Together as a community, we will navigate this challenging path and emerge stronger. Stay safe, take care of each other, and let's continue to support those in need during this critical time. Welcome everyone to the Hikes and Mics podcast. I'm your host Ivan, and together we'll embark on a weekly journey, connecting with extraordinary hikers from all corners of the United States and beyond. Throughout these winter months, we've had the privilege of conversing with remarkable individuals. Their experiences and adventures will leave you yearning to hit the trails. This special Valentine's Week episode of Hikes and Mics features an incredible love story that unfolded step by step on the Pacific Crest Trail. We're joined by returning guest Chickpea and her partner Artifact as they share their individual journeys to the PCT, their very different approaches to preparing for a thru-hike, and how a chance encounter at mile 300 led to something neither of them expected, falling in love on the trail. From hiking through the snow-covered Sierras together to surviving on the PCT diet, Chickpea and Artifact take us through the highs, lows, and unexpected twists of their PCT journey. We also dive into life after trail, their experiences as full-time digital nomads, and their next big adventures, including a possible trek on the Camino de Santiago. Tune in for a heartwarming, hilarious, and inspiring conversation about love, adventure, and the power of taking risk, both in the wilderness and in life. Without further ado, let's jump into this episode with our guests, Chickpea and Artifact. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mics podcast. We have a special Valentine's Day week episode. We have a returning guest and her partner, who she was able to share a little bit about during her episode. We have Chickpea and Artifact joining us today, and they're going to be sharing a little bit about their experiences on the PCT, what they've been up to since the last episode, and then also learning a little bit about Artifact's background story. Thank you so much, you guys, for coming back on the podcast. We always like to start off by having our guests share a little bit about themselves and how they got started hiking.
Oh, hello, I'm Artifact. Happy to be here. Thank you for having us. I grew up in Montana and moved to Seattle 15 years ago. I run a little online business helping people build computers. I love traveling, eating all the local food, and outdoor adventures.
And I am Chickpea. I've spent the last decade living abroad and traveling. I'm a yoga teacher and mindset coach, and I help individuals gain confidence in the outdoors, whether that's a thru-hike, a backpacking trip, or just a fun travel adventure. And I'm super excited to be here. Thank you so much, Ivan, for having me back.
Yeah, really excited for this episode, you guys. Artifact, one thing that caught my attention from your background is you grew up in the beautiful state of Montana, but then also lived in my neck of the woods in the Pacific Northwest in Washington. Can you tell us a little bit about your hiking background and how was it growing up in Montana, and how did that kind of shape your love for the outdoors?
Yeah, I was fortunate to grow up right in the Rocky Mountains outside Helena in central Montana. I could walk out my back door and be in a stream or in national forest in 5 minutes. Montana's a beautiful place. It's also known for its extreme weather. Temperature range where I lived is about minus 40 to plus 115, which is, plus 40 Celsius for international people. But even with those extreme temperatures, it's always sunny and dry even in winter. And the air and the water is super clean, except for when there are forest fires. There aren't that many people. And all of that together just makes it a really enjoyable place to be outside. So when it was warm out, I'd be outside working in our garden, taking care of our animals, or just running around, building forts, riding my bicycle, swimming, fishing, and hunting. And my parents really liked to hike, so we would regularly go on day hikes and short backpacking trips, kind of all over Montana. And then in winter, when it got colder, be out skiing or building snowmen. I don't know if anybody in the audience enjoyed the comic strip Calvin and Hobbes in the 90s, but I definitely did, and I built a lot of snowmen inspired by it. So snowmen doing things like being chased by snow sharks swimming through the snow, or a snowman bowling with his own head, or a snow dog peeing on a snow fire hydrant. In fact, I pretty much modeled my life after Calvin and Hobbes, actually, inventing things and wandering around outside through the forest.
I love that. Yeah, growing up, one of my favorite calendars to get for the holidays is the Calvin and Hobbes calendar, where each day was a different cartoon. I definitely remember the different snowmen, but that's really creative because I think all I did was like Frosty the Snowman. I might have to do that next winter, even this winter, if we get some more snow, and do some more creative snowmen. Now, for me, Artifact, when I go to Montana to hike, I definitely change my approach to hiking in Montana compared to the Pacific Northwest. How did your hiking style evolve when you moved to Seattle? And what were some of your favorite trails in the Pacific Northwest?
Yeah, I've got a lot to say about Seattle. Moved to Seattle in 2010, and it's definitely a very different place from Montana. Being in Seattle in the big city, I couldn't just walk out my back door into the mountains anymore. And Seattle is notorious for being gray and rainy, which is true and was a big shock coming from the constant dry, sunny days of Montana. However, the rain is actually Seattle's secret weapon because it makes the whole place just super lush and green, and I learned to love that. And the city is surrounded by spectacularly beautiful natural environments. To the east of Seattle are the Cascade Mountains, which are like a primeval version of the Alps, with steep glacial valleys with crystal clear rivers full of salmon in the bottom, surrounded by forests of ancient old-growth conifers, topped by jagged snow-capped granite peaks. And then on the other side, west of Seattle, is the Olympic Peninsula, one of the largest areas of intact ancient temperate rainforest on the planet. Massive old-growth trees, sometimes thousands of years old, covered in soft green moss, ferns and mushrooms growing everywhere. When I'm out there, I always feel like I might see a dinosaur pop out of the bushes. And then you also have the Pacific Ocean right there too, with orcas, whales, dolphins, seals, and otters. Since moving to Seattle, I've been fortunate enough to travel a lot. I've been to most of the states and a good number of countries. And in my personal opinion, the Pacific Northwest is the most beautiful place on the planet.
I'm a little biased, but I gotta agree. And since you know about the gray and dreary winters, I think a lot of people think of Seattle and associate, gray, rainy, and cloudy. But I gotta say, Seattle summer, it's truly unrivaled with the lakes, the mountains, the lush green vegetation. It's something else on a beautiful summer day.
Yeah, absolutely. And just having that gray winter makes us appreciate the beautiful summers all that much more. And so I do have a couple of trail recommendations for you, which I wouldn't be surprised if you've hiked. But I have a favorite day hike around Seattle, which is the Cascade Pass Trail. So it's about 3 hours northeast of Seattle in the Cascades. And it's probably, if I had to pick one single most beautiful day hike that I've ever done, I think it's Cascade Pass, and it's pretty consistent about it. It's kind of a condensed version of all of the beauty that I love in Washington State, with the green forests, jagged peaks, waterfalls, and even a glacier up top. It's also great for wildlife. I think I saw a bear and mountain goats last time I was there. It is well known, and it does get very busy though, so I would avoid that in any busy times. And then I also have a recommendation for a short backpacking trip out on the Olympic Peninsula, which is Hoh River to Blue Glacier Trail. It's about a 5-day backpacking trip. where, again, it's kind of like a microcosm of all that Washington has to offer. Start out in the super lush, dense, old-growth rainforest in the bottom with the massive ancient trees. You follow the river up. You can see salmon in the river. You can watch elk come down to drink out of the river. And then the trail goes through the forest up into the alpine, where you can stuff yourself full of the most delicious blueberries and huckleberries and maybe run into a bear. And then you go all the way up above the tree line to the raw granite and ice with spectacular views of the Big Blue Glacier.
Oh, those are two stunning places here in Washington. And I got to agree, I think outside of Kolchak and the Enchantments, Cascade Pass is probably one of the most spectacular places, not just in Washington, but the Pacific Northwest. And I know I've said this on several episodes, but one of the random highlights about that is it has one of the most spectacular views from a pit toilet.
I noticed on the PCT that Washington, for whatever reason, Washington has a lot of spectacular pit toilets. We definitely noticed that on the PCT. Everybody was talking about it in Washington on the trail. The views from the toilets.
It got so popular that a popular YouTuber, Miranda in the Wild, who used to work for REI, this summer she did I guess, best of pit toilets in Washington State series. And Cascade Pass was number one. So I was like, I'm being heard and I'm being seen with that video series.
Oh, that's amazing.
Now, during Chickpea's episode, she shared her inspirational and amazing story on how it led her to get on and do the PCT. When did you first hear about the Pacific Crest Trail, and what motivated you to take on such a massive challenge?
Yeah, my story is quite a bit different. I don't have anything quite as inspiring as Chickpea. I've just always done a lot of hiking and backpacking and always enjoyed it. So it was about a decade ago when I was on a 3-week backpacking trip in Montana in the Bob Marshall Wilderness, and I was pretty deep into the trip. There weren't many people. I was probably seeing more bears than people at that point. And then one day I was passed by a dirty, smelly, skinny guy carrying a tiny backpack who was going really fast. And this piqued my curiosity. I was like, who is this guy? What is he doing? I ran into him again at the next water source. He was taking a break, and I asked him a bunch of questions. And it turned out he was about 3,000 miles in on the Continental Divide Trail heading to Canada. He'd already hiked the Pacific Crest Trail and the Appalachian Trail. And I just thought all of that was so cool. And so I wanted to be like that guy someday. And so that just kind of had sat in the back of my mind for about the last 10 years. I knew I wanted to do it at some point. And then in 2023, things just kind of worked out that it was a good time for me to be able to actually take the 6 months to go do it.
How great that like a chance encounter kind of planted the seed for you to do it. You know, we've had several Pacific Crest hikers and Continental Divide hikers, and each one approaches preparing for their thru hike a little bit differently. Can you share a little bit about how you prepared? And this one's for you too, Chickpea. What were your thoughts when you learned about each other's approach and preparation?
Yeah, we'll have a little bit of a contrast between the way that I prepared and the way that Chickpea prepared. So for me, I'd had that thought in the back of my mind that I would like to do one of these big thru hikes, and the timing worked out. So I went to go see what it would actually take. I knew for such a long hike that a permit would be important, and turns out there's a permit for the PCT. Great. So I figured out what I'd need to do for that. I thought I might need to plan in advance for that, and sure enough, I needed to plan weeks or months in advance to get the permit. So I did that. I signed up. I got my permit, and then there was a big kind of roadblock that had kept me from doing a thru hike, at least in my mind. I always assumed that the logistics would be really hard. Like I would have to plan out 6 months of meals and then actually buy 6 months worth of food and take it home and pack it up into a big room full of boxes and make a big list of like, okay, this box needs to go to this location on this date. And then I'd have to enlist somebody to pay attention to that list and ship off my boxes for me. I didn't realize that is way easier than that. So when I actually did some Googling and looked into like, okay, how do I resupply on the PCT? And then learned like, oh, I can just stop in towns along the way and buy food. And every once in a while, maybe I'll have to ship myself a box, but I can do that from Montreal too. So that was a huge relief and made me feel like I could actually go do this. So at that point, I was pretty much ready to go. I bought a few days worth of food for the start of the trail, packed up my gear, got on a 3-hour flight to San Diego, found the bus to the trailhead, and I was off. Although, irony is, all of that couple of days worth of preparation I did, I'd actually screwed up the permit part. I had assumed that I could just access my permit on my phone whenever I need it, but it turns out that's not true. I had needed to print a physical copy of my permit, and because I hadn't done that before I started hiking, my permit had expired. So I started hiking the PCT without a permit, but it ended up working out fine. I was able to get another permit from the trail, just one starting a few hundred miles down the trail. So I just had to, up until the point where my permit was valid, I had to make sure that I was camping only in campgrounds or other places that I could camp without the permit.
Yeah, and I loved that story about your permit because for me on my side, I was in this Facebook group that was dedicated for PCT thru hikers. It was run by a trail angel named Yogi, and she has a small business for hikers called the Triple Crown Outfitters. And I remember every week she was reminding us in this Facebook group to print off your permits because you won't have it available once you actually start the hike. And for me, I thought that was just, common knowledge. And so to hear that story from Artifact that he actually didn't have his permit ready was quite surprising to me. And yeah, I think our approaches were quite different. We found it really interesting when we shared our journeys to starting at that southern terminus. Artifact has shared that his preparation was kind of just on a whim, did a little bit of research, got the permit, showed up at the southern terminus pretty easily. On my side, I was pretty obsessed with the thru hike. I had zero backpacking experience. So I had a steep learning curve, right? I didn't know anything. Artifact had a lot of backpacking experience growing up in Montana and in the Pacific Northwest, but I really treated this research time like a full-time job. I was spending any of my free hours watching YouTube videos. I loved watching YouTubers like Jupiter Hikes is a great one. Darwin on Trail I really enjoyed. And then Mari Johnson, I can't remember which year she hiked, but I just really resonated with her content. And so, every day I was learning about gear, I was learning about safety, I was learning about logistics, and I probably took about 9 months to a year of preparation. So when I heard Artifact's approach to starting the PCT, I was just really inspired by how kind of free-spirited and spontaneous he was. And, I think it was a funny story. He shared that he didn't even know when the next resupply town was when he started the hike and just kind of packed enough food and hoped he'd get food sooner or later. And, most hikers really plan out their logistics, their resupply to make sure that they have enough food to get to the next town. So yeah, really fun.
Yeah, I packed up about a week's worth of food for the first little bit of the trail, and I think I had most of that food in my backpack for about a month because there were towns every 2 days.
And I imagine you guys, meeting everybody else that's on the trail that's doing the PCT and, getting together with your trail families. I imagine everybody had a different approach on how they prepared for it. Did any stories that kind of stood out with people that you met?
I think a big one for me that I would see quite common throughout the thru hikers that I would meet on trail is their resupply strategy and how they prepared for that prior to trail. Artifact spoke to this earlier, that there is a popular strategy to organize your entire food for 6 months and pack them up in boxes and send them ahead and have that mail drop strategy. So that was really interesting because both Artifact and I didn't take that approach. We were both really excited just to take it town by town. And what I found with that resupply strategy of that mail drop and organizing all of the food, hikers very quickly learned that they were craving different food or, required different needs for their kind of nutrition on trail. And so they had all of these mail drops waiting for them. They'd show up at town, they'd pick up their box, and they didn't want anything inside. So they ended up putting their food into the hiker box so other hikers could take it, and they'd buy a brand new resupply for that stretch. So I found it, quite interesting that there was so much preparation in advance. But in the end, things change so fast on trail that you kind of throw out all of that planning out the window as soon as you start.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you guys were able to share your experience, because I would say for me, when I have seen the strategies on either YouTube or on blogs, it's mostly been that mail drop strategy. So I'm glad to hear that there's another option, because like for me, even just backpacking for 3 days, I get sick of, the freeze-dried meals after day one. So it's really great to be able to maybe do a mixture of them, or like you said, there's so many towns now on the PCT that have availability for meals and resupplies rather than just doing mail drops. One thing I did want to go back to is this last summer at Chinook Pass, I saw a lot of PCT hikers with like a PCT tag hanging from their backpack. I thought that was the permit, but it sounds like you need a paper permit. Do you guys know what that tag means or signifies?
Yeah, so I have one of those tags on my backpack still, and it's completely unnecessary. It's just a fun little tag to show that you're hiking the PCT, or even now at this point, I guess, just supporting the PCT.
So I got my little, what do we want to call it, little badge on my backpack at Cleef Campground just before the southern terminus. There was 2 representatives from the PCTA that were checking our permits, and they were giving these out. Everyone was really excited to put this proudly on their backpack, but Artifact, you didn't get yours until about 2 months in at the Sierra.
Yeah, I think I got mine right as we were going into the Sierra. That was actually the first time that anybody had checked my permit or asked for my permit.
Good to know. Now I'll know when I see folks coming in 2025. Switching gears, guys, I know the Pacific Crest Trail is known to be a test for both physical and mental endurance. What would you say was your biggest challenge in the early days of the trail?
I always like to say that the most important piece of gear you need for a thru hike is your mindset. And this was absolutely the case for me. I had a lot of mental challenges, especially in the early days of my thru hike as a brand new backpacker. There's a lot of concerns and fears when you're embarking on a long distance hike. Could be homesickness, loneliness, fear of failure, self-doubt, the list goes on. And for me, I think my biggest mental challenge was safety. I had never done anything this monumental alone. And in particular, I was really concerned about sleeping in my tent. It felt really scary to me to sleep in the outdoors, like something I'd never experienced before, in this vast wilderness where the dangers felt infinite. When I was in my tent, at night in the dark, every sound felt heightened. So I'd convince myself that the sound of a twig breaking was a starving and angry bear waiting to pounce. And I managed this fear by always camping with friends or other hikers. I really felt that I had the safety in numbers if I wasn't at a campsite alone. And it helped me feel calmer at night, knowing that I had other hikers around in case anything happened. But another technique that I would do to overcome this challenge was to really challenge and reframe my thoughts. So, for example, if I was laying in my tent at night and I caught myself thinking, I'm unsafe, there's dangerous things outside, I'm scared, I kind of have this inner dialogue with myself and try to reframe that thought. So instead of lying awake at night, thinking to myself, this isn't safe, I'd reframe that thought and reassure myself. And I'd say, I am safe. Nothing is going to happen. And all I can do right now is get some rest so I have energy for tomorrow. And I'd repeat this to myself enough that I eventually would convince myself and fall asleep.
And it was really interesting for me to hear about Chickpea's challenges because they're so different from my own experience. A great little example of how different people's experiences can be. Like, I didn't really think about that mental aspect of the hike at all. Like, I figured before I started that there was a chance that I might get bored out there for 6 months, or I thought maybe that I'd get too lonely spending 6 months alone hiking in the mountains, although that was mostly because I didn't know what to expect, hadn't done my research, didn't realize how social the trail would actually be, which was a lovely surprise. But my actual challenges on the trail were pretty much all physical. I'm almost 40, and despite having a lot of experience being outside hiking and backpacking, I'd never done anything requiring so much endurance. So I knew that would be an issue for me. I knew I'd be pushing my body. I knew that probably my biggest chance of having to go home was pushing myself too hard and injuring myself, especially early on the trail before my body had time to adapt. So the first day I walked 5 miles, and that felt easy. Second day, I walked 15 miles because I was trying to keep up with younger, fitter hikers, and that was too much. I woke up quite stiff and sore on the third day and with my feet full of blisters. So for the next couple weeks, I forced myself to take it slow, do less miles than I knew I could, and I stayed near about 10 miles per day. And that allowed my blisters to heal and allowed me to slowly get stronger, and that worked well. After that, I had a couple more physical issues. My knees and hips hurt for a couple weeks, but that fortunately went away on its own. And then the big physical challenge that I struggled with for pretty much the whole rest of the trail was I had some Achilles tendonitis show up. And that was pretty much my limiting factor for the entire rest of the trail. For that, I had to learn a bunch of new stretches that I could do, and I had to really be careful listening to my body. So I would pay attention, see how my Achilles were feeling, and then when they'd start to feel sore, I'd stop and stretch, and then I'd see how they felt and see if I could continue hiking. And I'd hike on some more, and when they were getting sore again, stop and stretch again. And then, oh, this time they're still too sore. I need to just stop for the day. And fortunately, I was able to deal with that and made it all the way to Canada.
Artifact, one thing that you guys were able to share with me is that you struggled with keeping calories in. And that's always something that I'm curious about, because depending on the day, like you said, you can put 5 miles in, 15 miles in, sometimes even more, especially when you have elevation gain. What did your guys' diet look like at the beginning of the PCT, and how did it change over time?
Oh my goodness. My diet on the trail was the biggest surprise for me. I did not know what to expect on the trail because I'd only done short backpacking trips before, and I hadn't dove into all of the resources available online. So this just came out of the blue. I started out the trail packing the sorts of things I usually eat in my day-to-day life. Like I try to eat fairly healthy. So lots of whole foods, nuts, seeds, fruit and veggies. So I started out the trail with, dried fruit and nuts and seeds and lentils and stuff like that. And that had always worked for me in the past. But like you say, once I started ramping the miles up, doing 15, 20, 30 miles a day after day, my calorie needs ramped up too. And the hiker hunger hit me hard. I'd never been doing 4,000 to 5,000 calories a day before, and it was crazy. Like my hunger was constant, just thinking about food all the time, and when I would get to town, I could unleash my inner glutton and eat as much as I wanted of whatever I wanted. And even doing that, I was still losing weight constantly through the whole trail. So my diet over the course of the trail went from the healthy stuff at first to pretty quickly, just in the first month or so, that kind of went away. And in town, I would dream about getting to town so I could find the biggest cheeseburger in town and devour that along with fries and a drink and a dessert or 2 or 3. I even started drinking soda again, which I probably hadn't touched for 10 years. I started joking that drinking water was useless because it was just empty volume in my stomach with no calories. I remembered one more thing, a new obsession that I developed on the trail, along with all of this junk food that I started eating. In the town of Etna in Northern California, I discovered the most delicious root beer in the world from Etna Brewing. And after I had that delicious root beer in Etna, I became obsessed with trying every local root beer in every town we stopped in. But I was chasing the dragon, and to this day, I have not found a root beer that can compare to Etna root beer.
It was so good. I still remember that root beer. Yeah, I miss my trail food diet. Like, it really was a kid's dream to be eating just absolute junk food and not having any concern about it. My diet included, Snickers, donuts, potato chips, candy, ramen every day. It was absolutely amazing. My favorite food ritual was to always pack out 2 bags of potato chips and combine them into one Ziploc bag. And every break, every opportunity I had, I would sit down and just devour these potato chips. My favorite combo was mixing Sun Chips French onion flavor with Dots honey mustard pretzels. It was so tasty.
Oh, the Dots, so good.
Oh my God. But I think what was really challenging for both of us was post-trail, because our bodies continued to crave the sugar and the fat, and our metabolism was still running so high, even though we were no longer hiking that, 25-mile, 30 days. So it was so hard to break from that junk food addiction from trail. We still wanted to have potato chips and donuts and really had to train our bodies to enjoy, again, that fresh produce and getting into a routine of healthy cooking.
Oh, yeah. It took me months to break my newfound sugar addiction. And it was wild because even with all of that junk food, by the end of the trail, I had lost more than 20 pounds. And I started out with not a lot to lose. I started out at about 150 pounds. And then by the end of the trail, I was below 130. I think I lost basically all of my body fat. And I could really feel it the last month or so in Washington when all my fat was gone. Like after I'd eaten breakfast, I would feel good. I'd be hiking and be snacking and feel good, eat lunch, feel good. But then in the afternoon, like the food would be wearing off and I couldn't get in enough more new food fast enough. And my energy levels would just really drop. It was wild.
Oh, man, you guys are making me hungry.
Yeah.
One, I'm going to put Etna Brewing on the Google map so I can check it out, because I just became aware that there's like these artisanal root beer companies that, are making some really delicious, not just root beer, but other beverages. But, growing up, it was always mug root beer. But there's some really creative people doing some great things with not just root beer, but other beverages. And I think I'm going to have to try the Dots Pretzels and Sun Chips trail mix. One thing I did want to touch on before we dive into your love story is I always love asking the origin story behind people's trail names. And Artifact, I was hoping you'd be able to share a little bit about how you got your trail name.
I had a lot of options for trail names. People kept suggesting me trail names because I didn't have one for, the first 2 months into the hike. And so I had various suggestions, and
you had a really big beard.
I did have a big beard at that point. So one of the first suggestions I got was Blackbeard, and that was fine, but I don't know, felt a little too straightforward, a little too obvious. So I actually ended up getting Artifact from Chickpea. So Artifact comes from my love of finding artifacts on the trail. So as I'm hiking down the trail, I like to be watching out for little signs that people have been hiking that trail for a long time. I mean, you might find like a broken trekking pole basket on the trail or something, but if you look hard, I will often find little bits of stone that are out of place. So they can be obviously arrowheads or spear points or something like that, or even just little flakes of that stone from when somebody was sitting down next to the trail there 500 years ago or 2,000 years ago working on making a new arrowhead or something, and that little flake of stone is still there. So I love to find that stuff, and I often can find it on the hiking trails because the hiking trails are often where they are for specific reasons. Like often we are trying to hike from this valley over into that valley so that we can continue on towards wherever we're trying to go. And often the best path to get from this valley over to that valley is to aim for the lowest pass between the valleys. And so there's often kind of a natural way to go in the terrain. So people have been hiking that same route for thousands of years. And not only just hiking, moving around through the terrain, but where we camp also. Because often we want for a campsite some common things. We want a flat spot to set up our tent, and we would like it to be near some fresh water so that we can have some water to drink. And then it's on that path, maybe between mountain passes or something. So again, often in those spots, people have been setting up camp there for thousands of years. So I love finding those little connections to those past people. I love finding the artifacts. So that's where Artifact comes from. And I'll also say that I love finding the artifacts, but I also, as tempting as it is to take home a cool artifact, I will leave them there because taking them out of their context removes a lot of their value. If I find an artifact and I can find a few artifacts and kind of put them together and see what else is there, then I can learn something about those people. And if I take it away, then it becomes just a cool rock. And also the descendants of those people tend to not want them touched. And also it's illegal. So lots of good reasons not to take arrowheads, as cool as they might be.
I love that origin story, and I gotta ask, what were some memorable artifacts that you did come across on the trails?
On the PCT, there weren't as many as I was expecting. There were a few places, especially in California, like before the Sierra, approaching the Sierra, there was a big stretch where there was just obsidian all over the place, little flakes of obsidian all over the place. So I don't know who was leaving those little flakes around or when they were there, but there was a lot of cool stuff there. We camped at one place where, just looking around by the tents, I found a couple of little cool arrowheads in a couple different styles. So it's just kind of little things like that all up and down, but especially California.
Colorado Trail, you were finding them almost at every mountain pass.
Oh, the Colorado Trail was incredible for artifacts. There was a ton of stuff. There were parts of that trail where I would see more of that stuff than I'd seen pretty much anywhere. So it was really cool. I loved it.
Did you ever come in across anything in Washington State that you can recall?
I don't remember on the PCT. We were kind of in a hurry at that point, though. We were on a deadline to get Chickpea to Canada before her visa expired. But hiking around in Washington, I've definitely found a lot of stuff there. And it's kind of the same sort of thing. Anywhere that's a nice campsite up in the mountains, maybe next to a little mountain lake, if I look around on flat spots, usually I'll find stuff. And I also remember, I don't remember what river it was near, but finding a really cool, I forget which half it is, but whichever half of the mortar and pestle is the bottom half, like the bowl, I found a really cool one of those on a river in Washington.
That's incredible. Now, guys, the one portion that I really wanted to talk to you guys about is the story of how you met on the PCT, and I wanted to get your guys' story on how each of you met each other, but then also, when did you decide to start hiking together? What point in the PCT did you make that decision?
Yeah, the love story of our journey on the PCT. So we started actually just a few days apart from each other. I started on March 31st and Artifact began on April 5th. But we didn't actually meet until about exactly mile 300, which is about a month into trail. And at that time, we were both hiking with our own trail families. I remember the first time I saw Artifact at mile 300. I said hello to him as I walked by as he was sitting on the side of the trail snacking on lunch. And what I really loved about the PCT was chatting with other hikers when I would pass them. But when I said hello to Artifact, he only responded with a quick hi. And so I had the feeling that he didn't really want to chat. He wasn't super into it. So I was a little bit disappointed. I kept on walking. I eventually stopped for lunch, and I love my lunch breaks. I take the opportunity to journal about my day, take some time for myself and really reflect. And there was a really convenient bench just by a bridge, so I decided to stop for lunch. And while I was there, Artifact walked by again, and again, he just said a short hello. So by this time, I was feeling actually quite frustrated because he wasn't being friendly and approachable. And the PCT is such a social trail. It's so common to stop and talk to other hikers. So I quickly made this judgment about him and had this feeling that maybe he thought he was better than me.
Which was totally a fair observation and judgment to make, because I did think I was better than Chickpea and I was judging her. I could tell that she didn't know what she was doing out here. I mean, I wasn't avoiding talking to her. I'm just not the most social guy. So saying hi and continuing on my way is the most normal thing for me to do. But also, I was judging her. I could tell she didn't know what she was doing out here. She was covered in bright pink, shiny new outdoor gear, which was fine, except she was playing music out loud right on the trail. And I was definitely judging her for that.
Yeah, that was a foul play on my end, definitely. And yes, all of my gear was brand new and shiny. It was pretty obvious that I was a beginner backpacker. But we kept kind of leapfrogging each other throughout the day, and we ran into each other again at a stream crossing. And I'd read on the Far Out app comments, it's a navigation app that PCT hikers use, that you had to ford the river. So I was prepared to stop, put my sandals on, and cross the river. And Artifact and I exchanged some words. We chatted, finally, and he wanted to avoid getting his feet wet. So he was going to hop the rocks to cross. And I remember being impressed in that moment and kind of admired his easy, carefree approach and thinking, oh, this guy's actually kind of cool.
And after that crossing, we walked and talked a little bit, and I learned that Chickpea had moved to France, without being able to speak French. And I thought that was really cool and courageous. And we talked about traveling and foraging for mushrooms and many other things. I started to realize, okay, she may be a beginner out here, but she also might be a cool person. And after an hour or two, we arrived at Deep Creek Hot Springs, this amazing natural hot springs right on trail. We parted ways there and rejoined our trail families who were both already there. But we were all spending the rest of the day hanging out at the hot springs. So Chickpea and I ended up talking more. And I remember being impressed there because she was willing to join me when I would get out of the hot springs and go jump into the cold stream. And by the end of that day, I secretly confided in my trail family that I had developed a crush.
I'm glad that he's impressed because that creek was so cold. It was amazing. It's called the Deep Creek Hot Springs, and it's, all natural. You have all these little different pools of hot water. But what's really fun is there's an absolutely freezing cold creek. So you can kind of do a cold plunge, go back into the hot water and cold plunge. So yeah, I was just having a lot of fun with Artifact that day, and I just really enjoyed who I was around him. Like, he really brought out the best part of me, even just in that one afternoon when we were hanging out. Yeah, unknown to him as well, I also secretly confided to my trail family that I had a trail crush. I remember writing in my journal that night, a little bit frustrated because I didn't know how to spell his name correctly. At that time, he didn't have his trail name, so he was going by his real name, Orion, and I just loved the uniqueness of his name. And so, yeah, after that day at the hot springs, we didn't see each other for another 3 weeks. And to be honest, I didn't really think I was going to see him again. Like, you meet so many people on the PCT, it's really rare that you will bump into the same person twice. And at this time, I had decided to take 10 days off the PCT to fly up to Victoria, British Columbia to visit some friends. And by making that decision, it meant that by the time I got back on trail, my hiking bubble that I was hiking with, my trail family, and Artifact would be at least 10 days ahead of me. And then this crazy thing happened. I was at Hikertown preparing for the infamous night hike of the LA Aqueduct. Most PCT hikers night hike this section because it's really hot and exposed during the day. And I'm just hanging out, relaxing, and all of a sudden I see Artifact walk by. And you have to remember that I'd just come back from my 10-day trip. So I see a familiar face. I went up to Artifact to say hi, and we were both puzzled how we were both here weeks behind our trail family. And yeah, it turns out,
because completely independently, I had also left the trail for 10 days to go to my grandpa's 95th birthday party in Massachusetts. And we just happened to leave and come back at the same time and didn't really know anybody on the trail, but bumped into each other again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we took that as a sign to say, okay, I think there's something happening here. We both obviously had a crush on each other. We hadn't told each other at this stage yet. That came a little bit later down the journey. But at that moment, we decided to hike together, and we were inseparable as we hiked north to Canada. And it's really interesting. I remember looking back at PCT photos after the trail, and I found a photo from the day we met at the bridge where I was having lunch. And on that bridge, I'd taken a photo of a heart that had been shaped by small rocks. And I didn't really think of it much at the time, except thinking, oh, that's a cute little heart-shaped rock. And I don't know, looking at the photo now, I really see it as kind of a sign that it was telling me that love was in the air. It sounds really cheesy, but yeah, I really think it was meant to be that I met Artifact on that day.
I love stories like this where things really had to fall into place for it to happen. And the fact that you both went on a 10-day break from the trail, came back, had that experience in the hot springs, like the puzzle pieces all fell together to get you guys reunited and hiking the rest of the way. I do want to ask Artifact, because Chickpea was able to share that she joined you when hiking through the Sierras, where most people that year ended up flip-flopping, either going to Oregon or going to Washington and going southbound. What did you think when she said she was coming along on the Sierras, where, I feel like the majority of PCT hikers decided to flip-flop in 2023?
Well, by that point, I knew that she didn't have a lot of backpacking experience. I was already just so impressed that she had gone from zero experience, didn't know how to set up her tent, didn't know how to start a stove, to hiking the entire PCT. So I was not going to be at all surprised if she wanted to skip the Sierra. That would have been totally understandable. I knew that I was going to go in and see how it was, but I didn't expect her to want to do the same thing. So when she did decide that she was going to go in and give it a try, I was really impressed. I knew that this was somebody with some courage.
I think we call that pink blazing on the Pacific Crest Trail when you follow someone because you have a crush on them. I was definitely pink blazing. Don't regret it. It was the best 2 weeks in this year. We had so much fun together.
Now, hiking together 24/7 on the trail, it's a unique relationship test because normally, when you're dating off the trail, it's a little bit different. What would you say were some of the biggest challenges you faced as a couple on the trail?
Yeah, Artifact would always describe our relationship as like trial by fire because when we started hiking together, most days we really were together 24/7.
0 to 24/7.
Yeah, exactly. Spending every waking and sleeping moment together. And it wasn't like a traditional relationship, right? Where, I don't know, you go on a few dates every few weeks. We got to know each other really fast. We'd see each other in our highest and lowest moments, and that really did strengthen our bond together. I think what was actually the most challenging for us was at the beginning because I decided early on the trail to end my 10-year relationship with my boyfriend at the time living in France. And I really was grieving at that time, a life that I'd built with somebody else, and I wasn't ready to jump into another relationship. So I made that really clear with Artifact that, I needed time to process everything and I wasn't really sure what I wanted, but it was a really confusing time because I was developing really strong feelings for Artifact. He was just such a carefree, free spirit, calming companion that I had on the PCT, and I was so lucky to meet him and I wanted to explore that relationship. But at the same time, I had just ended a 10-year relationship, so was I really ready to jump into something right away?
Yeah, and I could tell that Chickpea was struggling with that very understandably, and that made things uncertain. It was both day-to-day and long-term was completely uncertain for quite a while, and that uncertainty was kind of hard for me to handle, but the only way that I could deal with it was to tell myself that I would make the most of today and then deal with tomorrow, and that worked out.
Yeah, and I loved that. Like, you were taking such a big risk not knowing what our future held, and I was just so in admiration and in love with you to kind of hold that space and be patient and really just kind of have that mindset of enjoying the present moment and not worrying about too much about what the outcome could be.
I think one thing that folks on the PCT, whether they're in a relationship or they're in a trail family, it's balancing the individual hiking styles. How did you guys balance like pace and breaks while still sticking together?
I was really lucky because Artifact was definitely very willing to adapt to my hiking style. So yeah, that's definitely one thing I loved about him was just kind of his carefree and easygoing spirit. There wasn't really any conflict or challenge with our hiking styles. He would just go with the flow. I think the only big difference was our morning routine. When I started my thru-hike on the Pacific Crest Trail, my trail family and we got into a really early hiking routine in the desert. So I was waking up at like 5:30 in the morning, leaving camp by 6 most days. And when Artifact and I started to hike together, this was very much a shock to his system. He wasn't, the most excited about the early morning starts.
Not a morning person.
But we made it work. Like, I would leave camp early, and because I was a slow hiker, and I do want to say that I'm just shorter, so that's why I'm slow. I think I'd be, fast if I had taller legs. But
I keep telling her, she needs to grow her legs longer.
So I would leave early. Artifact would eventually catch up. He'd probably catch up around lunchtime. It was fun because I would use this as my daily motivation, like in my mind in the morning when I'm hiking. I was like, how far can I hike before Artifact catches up to me? So I'd really, push my limit to hike fast and not take breaks so I could hike more in the morning.
Yeah, the reality of two people hiking together, if the two people would like to continue hiking together, then either they need to be exactly the same speed, which would be very convenient, or the faster hiker needs to be willing to slow down to the pace of the slower hiker. And so in this case, the faster hiker was totally willing to do that.
And Chickpea, do you remember what the longest time between you setting off in the morning and Artifact catching up was?
That's a great question. I think, unfortunately, it was always shorter than I had hoped. He'd always probably catch up to me by kind of mid-morning to lunch. Maybe the longest was probably after lunch where he hadn't caught up to me and I was having lunch alone. I'd been like, whoa, he's still not here. But it probably meant he was stopping to look at artifacts or something on the trail that intrigued him. So, he was taking a lot more breaks than I was as well.
And hiking solo or hiking with a trail family or hiking with a partner, I bet there's some unexpected changes or benefits that comes with hiking with your partner as opposed to solo hiking. Was there any unexpected changes that you guys found or encountered while hiking together?
I found one nice unexpected benefit, or maybe it should have been a little bit expected, but for me, hitching into town got a whole lot easier. I know this might be shocking for some people to hear, but people seem to be more willing to pick up a beautiful young woman together with a dirty bearded guy than just picking up the dirty bearded guy by himself. I love hitchhiking in theory, but in practice, usually I hate asking strangers for things, and that's kind of what the first part of hitchhiking is. Although I will say that most of the people that picked us up were really nice, kind people, and that was very wholesome and felt great.
Yeah, hitchhiking was a really fun and unique experience on the PCT. Yeah, another unexpected benefit, especially hiking with a partner versus a trail family, would be the, splitting of time and cost when you go into town. So obviously with a trail family, you can split the cost of the motel, but I think what Artifact and I did really well was we also split our time. Town days often we think are going to be, super relaxing. We're going to have time to recover. We're going to eat all the delicious food, but often we fail to forget that we have a lot of tasks and chores to do in town, whether that's, resupplying, so going to the grocery store, unpacking everything from the boxes, organizing them to put into your food bag, getting your laundry done, which means either literally sitting at the laundromat waiting for all of your clothes to wash or, hang out in your rain gear, but often it was really hot and you couldn't be outside in your rain gear, so you're most likely sitting at the laundromat. There were so many chores to do that by the time you finished everything, you didn't have any time to relax and recover. So Artifact and I would really divide and conquer. One of us would go get resupply, the other would do laundry, and that allowed us to actually have time to relax and enjoy town. And that was a really nice benefit that I hadn't had with my trail family.
I gotta admit, I think for me, when I do travel between White Pass or Chinook Pass, if I do see a PCT hiker, I'm more prone to stop and pick up multiple rather than just an individual. And it definitely does help if there's a female hiker involved. So there is that weird bias that people that do pick up hitchhikers, I think, are more prone, like you said, to pick up a couple rather than just an individual male.
Yeah, seems to be fairly universal and I suppose probably natural. Like you said, I think a big part of it also is pick up the group rather than a single person, because if it's a group of people, at least there's a couple more people or one more person that trusts that other person. Some good little social proof there.
You've already shared some really fun and unexpected moments that you guys had on the trail together. Are there any other moments that solidified your bond as a couple while on trail?
Early on, while hiking together through the Sierra, we were coming down off a mountain and it's all snow covered at this point. So going down, we did a lot of glissading. Like here, we were basically skiing down, but just in our shoes. So I was out front and I stopped and turned around to record a little video. And Chickpea came down behind me, first elegantly gliding down on the snow. And then suddenly she caught her foot and crashed face first into the snow. And despite having just smacked her face directly into the snow, she got up laughing, and that moment was when I knew that I was in love.
Aw. Yeah, we had a lot of fun in this year, didn't we? Because it was such a unique year with the high record snowfall and most of the hikers were flipping north, it really felt like we had the Sierra entirely to ourselves. And we were just like two little kids running around the snowy mountain and having the most fun snow adventures. And we quickly realized that when hiking down a side of a mountain, it was going to be A, a lot faster, and B, most importantly, more fun, that we would glissade down these mountains at any opportunity. Artifact definitely had a lot more elegance and finesse to his glissading techniques. I, on the other hand, was very much still in the learning phase, and I would just be tumbling down these mountains, giggling. Luckily, I never got hurt. I was always in a safe environment, but yeah, the glissadings were definitely moments that bonded us together.
Oh, I love that, guys. Now, when it came to your pack list, I was wondering, was there one item that each of you had that the other wished they had packed on the trail?
You were a little bit envious of my sleeping bag, at least in the Sierra.
Oh my gosh. I was cold in the Sierra. I had a 20 Fahrenheit down quilt, but I didn't have a draft collar. And I was always feeling just a little bit chilly, sometimes very cold. And I'd look over at Artifact and he would be so bundled up in this, really heavy duty sleeping bag. It was still a 20 Fahrenheit, so I don't understand how I was that much colder, but he was always so warm and I would just look at him in absolute envy and jealousy. I was always really envious of him in his sleeping bag in below freezing temperatures. So I definitely wanted his sleeping bag in those moments, but also didn't want his sleeping bag because it was really heavy.
Well, that's the irony of that is when we were in the Sierra, my sleeping bag was great. But when we were in the desert in North Cal, my sleeping bag was overkill and I was jealous of your nice, lightweight little down quilt.
Oh, it was great because I could zip it open like a blanket. So it was just so perfect in those hot nights.
Now, we've talked about your moments on the trail. That was in 2023. Let's catch up our listeners with what's been happening since you got off the trail. Is there any challenges that you guys faced? Because Chickpea, you being from Canada, and Artifact, you being from America, you have the different passports. How did, meeting on the trail and then getting off the trail, how did it shape your decisions moving forward once you got off the PCT?
Yeah, we have some serious first world problems when it comes to that.
Yeah, I think, when we finished the PCT, we really had to decide what we wanted to do. And, I was living in France at the time. Artifact was living in Seattle. And we decided, we wanted to be together and really start a life together. We had so much fun. We were absolutely crazy in love and still are to this day. So we wanted to continue our adventures and travel full time. So I decided not to return to France. Artifact moved out of his home in Seattle, and we officially began our new lifestyles as digital nomads. And I guess that's been, almost 2 years now that we've been doing that. We've spent months living in different countries across Southeast Asia, the USA. We're currently in Scotland right now for the next 3 months before we spend the springtime in Europe. And it's been just so much fun. We both have remote jobs that allow us to work from anywhere. And I think eventually we do want to settle down, and we've started exploring what that could look like for us. There is the challenge that we don't hold the same passport or citizenship, so we're exploring places like the USA, Canada, Europe, and I am really fortunate that I have a UK passport and a permanent residency in France, so it does open a lot of geographical doors for us.
Yeah, it's a very good problem to have, but because we have so many options, it's hard to pick where we want to live. We're trying to kind of balance economic opportunity, lifestyle, proximity to our family, who are all over the place. So eventually we will make a decision, but for now we have been making the responsible adult decision of just traveling full time so that we don't have to choose.
And do you guys already have your next country picked out after Scotland?
Yeah, we're going to spend some time in Spain. My mom lives there right now, and I have family that's going to come over from Canada, so it's going to be a really nice reunion, enjoy the warm weather, the delicious food, the Mediterranean Sea. So we're really looking forward to some quality time in Spain.
And I think we're going to possibly go hike the Camino, right?
Well, it's interesting because last episode I told Ivan and the audience that we had big plans to hike the GR20 in France and also the Via Dinarica Balkan Trail that goes through, Slovenia, Croatia, and a few other countries. We've had to slightly change plans because we had a shipping issue with our camping gear because we decided not to travel with our camping gear. We didn't need it in Malaysia these last 3 months. We made the decision to ship a box that was filled with all our gear from Montana, where we were in the summer, and ship it directly to Spain so we could hike across Europe and do all these fun trails. But unfortunately, it got returned. So all of our gear is back in Montana. We don't have any plan to go back to the USA before the summer. So we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we still do these fun backpacking trips, but without the gear? So we've thought about the Camino de Santiago in Spain because you don't need to have any of your sleeping gear like a tent or sleep system because you can sleep from village to village every day in these local hostels. So we're, changing plan a little bit, unsure where it's going to take us, and excited to see what we actually end up doing.
And one thing, guys, that I wanted to close out the regular questions with you is, what has been the biggest lesson you both have learned from this journey, both individually and as a couple?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson for me is to follow my heart. So I think this whole PCT experience really was a testament to following my heart. It was a huge leap of faith to embark on a thru-hike with zero backpacking experience, but I always followed my heart. It really did lead me to the most incredible experiences on trail, meeting the best people, getting so much kindness and generosity from trail angels. And it also led me to meeting Artifact, falling in love and now living a life together that I could really only dream of. So I've learned that it's really important to get out of my own way, not to overthink things and trust in that initial voice that's telling me just to go for it. I'm more capable of more than I could ever imagine. And it really does only take one step to that journey. And I just feel so proud of, what I've accomplished as an individual. And again, cheesy, but opening my heart to Artifact and giving our relationship that chance. Like we've, come so far since the PCT, and we are really living a dream that not only we dream of, but other people dream of. So I just feel really privileged and grateful to be where I am because I followed my heart and kind of that gut feeling.
Yeah, I wish that I could say that I had such a big inspiring epiphany. And I certainly saw not only Chickpea, but a lot of people out on the trail who were experiencing these big things, like thinking like, wow, the world is so beautiful. I need to spend more time outside and see more of it. Or, wow, I really don't like my job. Why have I wasted so many years there? I don't think I can go back to it after this hike. Or, wow, it feels so good to move my body and be in my body. I don't think I can go back to a sedentary lifestyle. But I didn't have any of those big experiences like that out there, any of those big realizations. So I guess that's actually my lesson, is validating that I'm happy with the choices that I've made that have led me to where I am today. And so I feel very fortunate and grateful to be here.
Oh, I love both of those lessons. Well, that was it, guys, for the regular questions. These last few are questions we like to ask all our hikers. Chickpea was able to answer some of these on her episode, but I would love to get both of your responses to these. The first one being, when it comes to hiking, backpacking, or even through hiking, was there a regular routine, whether it was a summit routine or end of the hike, end of the day routine that you guys would do, whether it's packing a favorite snack or meal, a moment of zen, or that, great meal afterwards? Is there a regular custom or routine that you guys do as a couple or as an individual?
Well, I have my routine, which is when I get back to civilization, I want to find the biggest cheeseburger I can find, and then I want a long, hot, decadent shower, and then I want to go into a coma in the most comfortable bed I can find for 12 hours.
Yeah, I think we're both pretty similar to that. We definitely loved our town food, so I think that kept us going. In between stretches was looking at all the possible restaurants in the upcoming town and, really brainstorming as to which restaurant we're going to go to as soon as we get off trail and just devour a hamburger. And for me, it was always a fresh pint of beer. I just absolutely guzzled that thing down as soon as I got into town.
Now, this next one's about your pack list, and we've kind of touched on a little bit of it. Is there a luxury item that you tend to pack that falls outside of the essentials?
Oh, my luxury item is my tent. I want to have a freestanding, double-walled, two-person tent. I want my tent to stand up even when it's not somewhere that it can be staked in, and I want to be comfortable when I'm in my tent. If it's rainy out, I want to be able to hang out in there and read or sleep or whatever. And so now that it's the two of us, I have upgraded to a three-person tent, and by ultralight standards, it is a palace.
It's an absolute castle, isn't it? It was really convenient though, because Artifact did have his two-person tent on the trail. It made it really easy for us to just transition into his tent, and I ended up shipping my tent forward. So yeah, unfortunately his castle of two-person tent got very snug early on the PCT. I would say my luxury item, after hiking for, 4 or 5 months, when I got to Washington, I just craved wearing something different in town other than my hiking clothes. So I found a thrift shop, I bought a dress and a pair of shorts, and I carried town clothes with me from Washington to Canada, and that's definitely considered a luxury item, but I was so happy to be wearing something other than my hiking clothes that I've been wearing for, 5 months straight.
Now, you shared with us, the next step in your journey is going to Spain, hiking El Camino. What's next for you both? Is there any future long-distance hikes that you're planning or any other travel plans on the horizon?
Oh man, always have so many things planned. Life is too short. And since the end of the PCT, I don't know what we mentioned already, but yeah, we've already hiked through the Himalayas, went scuba diving off New Guinea, hiked the Colorado Trail, had a lovely secluded backcountry hot springs in Yellowstone National Park all to ourselves. And yeah, now we're in Scotland. And then the Camino's our next hike, probably, maybe, but I mean, we keep making plans and then changing them. Right after the PCT, we had originally planned to go hike the Te Aurora in New Zealand, but then we just never made it past Southeast Asia. So who knows? We'll see what life brings us.
This last section of the podcast is the this or that questions. And Chickpea, we did add some new ones for season 9, so please jump in on these as well. But I'm going to give you 10 hiking related topics, and you just choose which one you prefer out of the two. But the first one is, when it comes to trail snacks, do you prefer sweet or savory?
Yes, please. I want to do an entire resupply with only potato chips and Skittles.
I'd have to go for savory. I'm still dreaming of my potato chips of, French onion sun chips and honey mustard Dots pretzel. So all the way savory.
That could be a new side gig, Chickpea. Package it, brand it, chickpeas mix.
I love it.
I think you got something on there. Now, the next one is a tough one, but waterfalls or summits?
Ooh, that's an easy one for me. Summits for sure. But I will say there are some spectacular waterfalls out there. Bernie Falls on the PCT in Northern California, that's probably the most beautiful waterfall I've ever seen.
Yeah, hard to choose. I would actually go for summits simply because of the Colorado Trail that we hiked this last summer in 2024. We were able to summit 3 of the tallest mountains in contiguous USA, and I hadn't really done much hiking other than the Mount Whitney on the PCT. And it's really fun to summit a mountain. So I would definitely go for summiting.
And the next one is about trail systems. Do you prefer one that has switchbacks or straight up?
Ooh, I'm all for the lazy shortcut, but switchbacks are there for a reason, and they make things better in long distance hiking, I think. I'll take the switchbacks.
Yep, me too. Switchbacks all the way.
Now, the next one is our most controversial one, Artifact, but trek poles or freehand?
Ooh, this is one where I've definitely changed my opinion over time. I used to be anti-trekking pole, but now I love them. They're really nice to have if I want to cross like a slippery log across a stream, or really anywhere with questionable footing, or I'm doing a long downhill with a heavy pack. The trekking poles really save my knees. So I always carry them, but I actually hardly ever actually use them. One of my suggestions for a trail name was something related to how I never used my trekking poles before I got Artifact.
Yep, me too. Definitely trekking poles all the way. They helped a lot on the PCT with crossing snowfields, as Artifact has said, crossing river crossings. I also needed them for my tent, so I did have a trekking pole tent. I had the one from Gossamer Gear, and that required 2 trekking poles, so I wouldn't have had a tent if I didn't have my trekking poles.
Now, this one is about your footwear. Are you guys rocking trail runners or wearing traditional hiking boots?
I had always worn hiking boots up to the PCT, and I swore by hiking boots, but then I saw that everybody seemed to be wearing trail runners, so I decided I'd try it out, and I don't think I can go back now. The trail runners have traction that's just as good, and they're just so much lighter. This is a kind of a counterintuitive part also, is I ended up going for trail runners that are not waterproof, like not Gore-Tex or anything, because on long hikes like the PCT, going through anywhere wet, my feet are eventually going to get wet either way. There's just going to be a puddle that's too deep for my boots, or a stream, or a river crossing or something. And I would much rather have breathable, quick drying shoes than be stuck in the wet shoes or boots for days straight. So for me, it's trail runners.
Yep, very well said. Team trail runners.
And this next one's another trail system question, but do you prefer a loop trail or an outback trail?
Always loop trail for me. I love my variety.
Yep, me too.
And then another new one to season 9. Do you prefer group hikes or solo adventures?
Ooh, that's a interesting one. I'm usually a solo sort of guy. Not real social, but I think for me, a group that is small enough. 2 to 4 people is my sweet spot. I want to have somebody to share the experience with. It just makes it so much more special, but I don't like a big, busy, loud group.
Yeah, I think there's a lot going for the solo adventures, especially as maybe a female who wants to gain confidence in the outdoors and kind of build that self-resilience. You're really going to, I think, grow more as an individual on that solo adventure. But I do have to say, I think I'm more group hikes. As Artifact has said, it's just better to be able to share those fun moments and those hard moments together and be able to reminisce post-hike.
These next 2 are our 2 hardest ones: sunset hikes or sunrise hikes.
Ooh, I love sunsets and sunrises, but it's a whole lot easier for me to be awake for a sunset than a sunrise.
Yeah, I'm the opposite. I just love waking up early and being able to catch the sunrise on the mountains. I think sunset, especially, long distance hiking, the sunset kind of triggers a little bit of fear in me because it's going to get dark and we, still have to pitch the tent or eat dinner. And I never could really enjoy the sunsets because of that. So I just loved the sunrises. There's an opportunity for a brand new day, and just waking up with the birds, waking up with nature, I found it just really grounding.
And then this next one's equally tough, but spring wildflowers or fall colors?
Ooh, I'm biased here because I've only ever really lived in the West, so definitely spring flowers for me. But I feel like if I spent more time on the East Coast where the fall colors are just spectacular, that might change my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. Growing up on the East Coast, I can't say anything but fall colors. Like, I'm so nostalgic of my childhood, of the fall season, just the vibrant oranges, yellows, and reds. So all the way fall colors.
And this last one, guys, I think I know the answer for both of you, but steep climb or long distance?
Gotta go with the long distance on that.
Yep, agreed.
Steep climbs are great too, though. Why not have both?
Well, that was it, guys, for the this or that questions. I always love doing it with couples or family members because sometimes the responses might surprise the other person. So thank you for sharing those with us. I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to come on the podcast and share your story. And I'm really looking forward to what 2025 has to bring for you guys. If folks want to follow your journey along, where are some of the places they can follow you at on social media or online?
Thank you very much for having us here. I hope you have a good 2025 also, and I'll leave Chickpea to her social medias.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun together today, Ivan, so thank you so much for having us. I would say I'm a lot more active on social media than Artifact, so if you do want to follow along on our full-time travel lifestyle, I post a lot of content on my Instagram. It's _it's me Chickpea, and I also share a lot of updates around my business, my mindset coaching, where I help others gain confidence in the outdoors through mindset and mindfulness practices. So whether you're looking to plan a thru-hike, a backpacking adventure, or travel to a foreign country, I'd absolutely love to support you on your adventure goals. So get in touch on Instagram, follow us on our fun adventures. Who knows where we will end up in 2025. So I'd love to hear from you guys.
And Chickpea, I think I did see that you're going to be hosting a yoga retreat later on this year.
I am. It's the first yoga retreat of 2025. I'm co-hosting it with my best friend, Megan, who's also a yoga teacher. We met in a local yoga studio in Luxembourg when I lived there. And we're also getting support from my mom as she's based in Spain. And the retreat's going to be based in Spain, not too far from where she lives. It's a stunning retreat location. It's surrounded by mountains. It's 4 nights, 5 days, a mix of energizing yoga. I do a lot of restorative yoga and sound meditations. And it's really just a time to escape from your daily routines and reconnect to yourself and find that inner peace and calm. So I do share information on my Instagram as well. Ivan, you should come. You'd love it.
Yeah, I'm not a yoga person, but it is a really pretty spot. I'm excited to get to hang out there and spend some time helping out a little bit.
And Chickpea, can you remind me of the dates for that?
The dates are in May, from May 17th to 21st. So it is a shorter yoga retreat, only 4 nights, but we are telling anyone that's interested to come to the retreat that we can help them extend their travels if they want to come a little bit earlier to discover the region or stay a little bit later. My mom's been living there for almost 5 years. I grew up in this area, spending my holidays in this area of Spain in the Costa Blanca. So we're very familiar with the region and have lots of travel tips. But yeah, May 17th to May 21st, which is a perfect time to come to Spain. It's just starting to get warm, still not too hot. There's a really lovely pool to hang out and relax surrounded by the mountains. So it's really an idyllic location.
I love that. We'll be sure to add that to the episode show notes so people can learn more about it.
There's still lots of room. It is an intimate setting, so I wouldn't wait too long. We're doing early bird pricing until February 10th. So I definitely would book in earlier so you can get that 15% off. And yeah, reach out if you have any questions.
Well, thank you again, you two, for coming on and sharing your story. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to speak with us again.
Thank you, Ivan. We had a lot of fun.
And that brings us to the end of this episode alongside Chickpea and Artifact. We extend a heartfelt thanks to them for coming on the podcast. Make sure to follow their adventures on Instagram @_itsmechickpea. And also don't forget to check out the episode show notes to learn more about Chickpea's mindset coaching and yoga retreat. We have an incredible lineup of episodes planned throughout the winter months, and we can't wait to share them with you. New episodes will be dropping every Monday with occasional bonus episodes on Friday. To ensure you never miss out on these thrilling tales, remember to hit the like and subscribe button. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to check out our vibrant community on Instagram @Hikes and Mics. We'll be sharing episode visuals, my own personal hiking content, and so much more. Let's stay connected and continue to inspire each other on this remarkable journey. As we bid farewell, remember to tread those happy trails, embrace the great outdoors, and keep the spirit of adventure alive. Until next time, my fellow explorers, happy hiking. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow him on Instagram @KetsaMusic. This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, ursaminoutfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, ursaminoutfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order.